Is this the landscape of a faraway planet, or the surface of the moon? No, these images are from the bottom of the largest freshwater system in the world, the Great Lakes of North America. Scientists have been mapping these majestic lakes. Now, for the very first time, we will combine their data and specialized computer imagery to drain the Great Lakes. We will uncover an extraordinary hidden world of cliffs hundreds of feet high where early man may have lived, of lost river valleys and submerged waterfalls, of a possible catastrophic alien encounter, and even a unique glimpse into our own history, not seen until now, as we drain the Great Lakes. The greatest of all lakes have been called inland oceans, freshwater seas. Their name depicts their grand size. Along their shores, one can gaze on natural wonders and soaring man-made skyscrapers. 34 million people who live near the water's edge call this home. But no one has ever looked down into the depths of the lakes like we will. Only now can we reveal their hidden secrets. We begin our exploration on Lake Superior, the grandest of the lakes, the largest, deepest, and most mysterious. Along the south shore of Superior is Pictured Rocks National Lakeshore, named for the colorful cliffs that rise from the lake bottom. It's one of the most spectacular locations on the Great Lakes. But it isn't the scenery that makes this location important. It is what lies offshore, deep under the water, that has never been seen before. If we drain the water from Lake Superior, just 40 kilometers out from Pictured Rocks, what will we find? We can reveal for the first time the hidden landscape of the deepest part of the Great Lakes Basin. Nearly 400 meters down, the height of the Empire State Building, no one has ever been here. No light penetrates to this depth. It is truly an alien landscape.
Most people have this idea that a lake is just a simple bathtub, essentially, and I like to think of it that it's basically a record of, it records not only what's happening now, but what's happened in the past. You know, it's essentially a fingerprint.
A record of the past, read by Nigel Watrous, who has studied this area extensively.
Those valleys are pretty big. That's such a contrast to other parts of the lake that, you know, it really makes you sort of sit up and think about, you know, the processes that develop that type of topography.
The processes that formed these valleys at the deepest part of Superior occurred when ice ruled the land. 20,000 years ago, if you looked down from space, you would have seen this. A massive ice sheet covering this part of the world where the Great Lakes now exist. This ice is believed to have been over 1.5 kilometers thick in places. It would have towered over cities like Chicago and Toronto. For thousands of years, this enormous ice sheet presses down, reshaping the land, gouging deep holes. When the ice begins to melt and retreats, these deep depressions fill up with cold glacial water. The result? The formation of today's Great Lakes. Fast forward to the present day. We can reveal the evidence of the glacier's effect on Superior's lakebed only because it's been surveyed in great detail. Modern technology gives us the ability to see through the water column. Nigel Watrous and his team from the Large Lakes Observatory in Duluth use side-scan sonar and multi-beam devices to map areas of Lake Superior.
So you've got basically a ridge which is running this way.
Since sound travels easily through water, it can pierce the depths of even the deepest part of Superior to uncover its shape and size in amazing detail. The multi-beam data collected gives us the ability to recreate the deepest part of Superior in lifelike realism. At 400 meters down, we can finally see how it formed.
Ice plays a role, but it's primarily acting as the cap, and it's the water flowing underneath, which is really carving those channels.
So water created these huge hidden valleys, which run for many kilometers at the deepest part of Lake Superior. The sheer weight of the glacier pressurized the meltwater. Sand and rock particles in the high-pressure streams carve through the bedrock, shaping these long, deep and wide valleys. With the water removed from Lake Superior's lakebed, another strange anomaly appears.
I was very excited to see rings. I mean, this was really the first data set that I can think of that documented the presence of rings in the eastern part of the lake.
These rings are unusual features. Superior is the only Great Lake in which they have been found.
The easiest way to think of them is imagine Paul Bunyan took a donut and he pressed it into the soft lake floor sediments. That donut would be about 200 to 300 meters across. Depression would be up to 5 meters deep. The width of the ring would be of the order of 10 to 30 meters. So, you know, it's a sizable feature on the lake floor. We're thinking that these rings are the result of water which was at one time trapped in those very fine-grained sediments getting released as a result of perhaps a catastrophic drop in the lake level.
These rings, born of changing lake levels, have been preserved on Superior's lakebed for thousands of years. Draining the lakes not only reveals hidden mysteries, but is a window to the past. Further south, we come across one of the most striking man-made features on the lakes. A huge suspension bridge spans the Straits of Mackinac between Lake Huron and Lake Michigan. At over 8 kilometers, it is the longest bridge in the Western Hemisphere. Once a year on Labor Day, the public are allowed to walk over the mighty bridge to marvel at this engineering achievement. The bridge spans are high and wide enough to offer safe passage to large cargo ships. Thousands of people take the opportunity to cross it on foot, but few, if any, are aware of what lies below the surface. If we drain the Straits of Mackinac, what will we discover? What the people can't see, and the challenge for the bridge builders many years ago, is a deep channel that snakes through the Straits of Mackinac. It's a 40-kilometer long, 1,000-meter wide gorge that runs secretly right under the center of the bridge. As we fly down the long hidden channel, how did this get here? Is this evidence that the Great Lakes were not always as they appear today? What occurred many years ago to create this extraordinary feature? The answer could lie with expeditions further to the south on Lake Huron. Expeditions that will find incredible evidence of submerged waterfalls as large as the present-day Niagara Falls, and with them, more revelations of the Great Lakes past. When we drain the waters from the Straits of Mackinac between Lake Huron and Lake Michigan, we uncover evidence of a hidden gorge under the massive bridge. How and when it was formed is a mystery that we may solve when we venture further south, to the center point of the Great Lakes Basin, on the tip of the Bruce Peninsula. Located here is the town of Tobermory, Ontario. This spectacular area holds many clues to the geological history of the Great Lakes. High atop the surrounding cliffs, there is evidence from over 10,000 years ago of incredibly high water levels. These high water marks of an ancient shoreline are easy to see, but what is not visible we can find offshore, hidden under the surface of the lake.
Tobermory region is quite unique in the fact that a tremendous number of features exist on the lake bed that tell you all about its history, the history of water levels going up and down. You can actually find most of the history as to how the Great Lakes drained by studying the lake bed here in the Tobermory region.
The idea that water levels have fluctuated wildly has excited some of the lake's leading researchers. It opens a window onto the past and could give clues to the future.
We have some preliminary maps of the lake bed here, and we're looking for early evidence that the lakes drained about at least 50 meters below their present elevation. Now, nobody ever thought Great Lakes water levels went that low, but we've learned that they did. Starting around 10,000 years ago, the climate was more arid, and lake levels dropped because of evaporation, and they eventually got very low, such that Georgian Bay was an isolated basin.
But it's been nearly impossible finding the evidence of lower water levels, since all traces have been hidden under hundreds of meters of water for over 6 millennia. Now modern technology has opened up a virtual looking glass. The Canadian Hydrographic Service boat is equipped with multi-beam technology.
The biggest thrills for a geologist is to be able to actually see something in the 3 dimensions. We can move around, we can actually look at all sides of the channel. I can see where the water actually flowed over the top of the escarpment. And then I can actually see the plunge pool at the bottom.
Using this new data, what will it look like when we drain the water off the Bruce Peninsula?
If you've been here 7,500 years ago, the water here would have been totally drained, the escarpment would have been exposed, and we had river flowing from the north to the south here. It actually turned to the east at this location here and then flowed to the east and over the escarpment to form the Dunks Point waterfall.
Further mapping reveals that more river channels and more waterfalls, some larger than Niagara Falls, existed off the Bruce Peninsula 8,000 years ago.
That's really key evidence. We now know that climate change will affect lake levels. For example, a meter change in lake level has an impact on the economy. We can look at the past and use it as a key to the future to help us understand what Mother Nature and what mankind is going to do to lake levels, and we can then determine what we need to do in the future to adapt.
The lake levels were low over the entire Great Lakes system. The lakes are interconnected, and what affects one affects them all. "7,000 to 8,000 years ago, you would have seen each lake as a separate basin, with few, if any, rivers running between them. The gorge under the spans of the bridge in the Straits of Mackinac formed when lake levels were much lower. It was then a narrow river joining Huron and Michigan. The low water level existed long enough to cut and gouge the lake bed, leaving behind this evidence of an ancient river channel. The geology of the Great Lakes is so recent that these events could have occurred when humans lived in North America. Is there any evidence of early man's presence at the time of low water levels? The answer may lie 80 kilometers to the southwest of Tobermory, in the middle of Lake Huron. Another striking feature rises off the lake bed when we drain the second largest of the Great Lakes. The Alpena Amberley Ridge. It extends across the entire lake. 7,000 to 8,000 years ago, it was dry land.
It's this massive limestone outcrop that resisted the ice sheets, and it exists on the bottom as a very striking column scarp of sheer rock that on the northeast side drops away hundreds of feet.
As this land bridge was exposed during the very years that early Paleo-Americans roamed the continent, could they have lived and hunted here? And after all this time, could anything underwater still show signs of their presence?
From a historical point of view, it's important not just because of the sites themselves, but because they present an opportunity that we'd never have on land, in the sense that the sites are pretty much left just the way the hunters left them. It's like a Pompeii underwater, really.
Using an ROV, a remotely operated vehicle, John O'Shea and his University of Michigan team have searched the lake bed for anything that might suggest the presence of humans on the ridge.
What we found to date are a series of stone constructions that are very similar to stone constructions that are made by modern caribou hunters in the Canadian Arctic.
By taking John's research, we can build a picture of the top of the ridge. It's only when we drain the lake that we can see the line in all its entirety. Are these caribou lines? The hunting technique that relies on the animal's habit of following linear features in the landscape. Could these stone constructions be just such a device to help funnel caribou into killing zones? So far, John and his team have been limited to ROV research.
In order to actually bring home the bacon and prove that we have the archaeological sites, prove that we have the artifacts, nothing to be done other than to put archaeologically trained divers on the bottom and have them systematically do this search.
John gets his wish. Divers descend the waters of Lake Huron to explore the lake bed. Could they be the first people on the Alpena Amberley Ridge in over 7,000 years? When we drain Lake Huron, the striking Alpena Amberley Ridge rises from the middle of the lake. 7,000 to 8,000 years ago, this towering cliff was dry land. A team of archaeologists believe they are discovering evidence of early man living and hunting on this ridge. When water is drained away, rock formations are seen that may have been placed by man to hunt caribou. A new expedition is hoping to shed more light.
This is the first day that we're going to go out and actually do scuba investigations on one of these caribou drive lanes. And it's really exciting for us because in a lot of ways, virtually everything we see today, even on the first dive, is going to be really new. To be really honest, I mean, the Holy Grail is the humblest flake, the humblest chunk of fire-cracked rock that confirms absolutely that this was a human occupation site.
80 kilometers out in the middle of Lake Huron, divers descend for the first time on this part of the ridge. They may be the first humans here for over 7,000 years. The divers begin to document and study this unique underwater landscape.
Literally any handful that you lift up could in fact have material on it. So every one of these is sort of pregnant with the potential. And you just kind of watch it from here on the video and sort of say, okay, I want to see that.
The divers have 45 minutes of bottom time to gather as much evidence from the lakebed as possible.
There goes the basket.
The expedition proves fruitful. There are countless samples for the team to study and analyze. A tiny, sharp-edged stone offers immediate hope.
That definitely looks like a bulb there. This would be typically a flake this size would be a bifaced trimming flake, a kind of tertiary flake where you're modifying the edge, you're fining up, or you may do it when you're resharpening or modifying a tool. And that's honestly why it is so very small. Yeah. Remember I told you the smallest, humblest little piece? Now, this may be the smallest, humblest little piece, but we'll take it.
It may take many more expeditions and detailed explorations on the surface of the ridge before the truth about man's presence can be confirmed. But the lakebed is giving up secrets. Evidence of the extreme low water levels from thousands of years ago are being revealed as we drain the lakes. Further south, water flows from Huron to the shallowest of the Great Lakes, Lake Erie. On the North Shore, we look down upon a geological wonder. A land formation that extends over 40 kilometers into the middle of the lake. It's made entirely of sand, a byproduct of glacial ice grinding away at the bedrock. This feature is fittingly named Long Point.
In terms of the Great Lakes system, Long Point is almost unique. It's not unique in the processes that formed it. It's unique in its size and the scale of what's going on.
What's going on? Simply put, this colossal sand feature is being created in Lake Erie at a geologically high rate of speed.
About 5,000 years ago, we probably would be standing in water because Long Point did not exist at that time. Long Point is built out into the deepest basin of Lake Erie to a depth of about 65 meters. So it's taken a tremendous amount of sand to build this thing up all the way to the surface.
Troy Holcomb headed up the team that created the first detailed bathymetric map depicting water depth of Lake Erie when he worked with NOAA, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. This is the data we use to drain Lake Erie. As the water level drops, we see two massive sand ridges, Long Point Escarpment and Clear Creek Ridge, hidden from view until now. Both of these ancient sand ridges almost bridge the lake. Only 20 kilometers west of Long Point are these sand cliffs, laid down by waters receding after the ice melted. These cliffs feed Long Point, and probably helped build up the ancient ridges, a process of sand redistribution that has been going on ever since the glaciers retreated and continues to this day.
Today we saw geological processes at work, moving sand around right as we were there. This area is eroding away very fast. You can see mud, sand in the water. The wind is from the southwest, and so the longshore drift, the sand is going to be to the east. Eventually it will make its way all the way out to the end of Long Point. You sort of see the dynamics of all the sedimentation that's going on here, and it's happening now and it's happening fast.
Downstream from Lake Erie is one place where there would have been the most dramatic change of all, probably the most spectacular landmark in the Great Lakes system. Niagara Falls. In a single minute, over 135 million liters of water flow over the falls into the raging Niagara Gorge. All the water in the Great Lakes Basin travels through this narrow corridor. The power and force of the water continually cuts back the gorge. Since the retreat of the glaciers, the falls have moved upstream from Lake Ontario, closer to Lake Erie by just over 11.5 kilometers, as the constant stream of water erodes, cuts, and creates the gorge. But during the time man might have walked on the Alpena Ridge, and the waterfalls existed in the Tobermory area, Niagara's roar fell silent. If we drain Niagara Falls as they were 5,000 to 10,000 years ago, this is what we would see. The raging Niagara River becomes a trickle, and for a period of several thousand years, the falls dry up. With all the upper lakes being separate basins, little water flows between Erie and Ontario. Mighty Niagara was not so mighty. Downstream from the falls is Lake Ontario. Draining this lake reveals striking clues to a turbulent past and an uncertain future. "5,000 years ago, the water starts to rise throughout the Great Lakes. A tropical air mass settles over the Great Lakes Basin, and precipitation fills the lakes to present-day levels. Niagara begins to flow. Long Point starts to form. And in Lake Ontario, something unusual is happening on the lakebed. Toronto is the largest Canadian city on the Great Lakes. 2.5 million people live and work near the Lake Ontario shoreline. It's a city that has been known to be geologically stable. But not far from the towering skyline of the city, something dramatic is occurring on the lakebed. The discovery of long ridges laden with cracks crisscrossing the lake bottom.
What happened is that North America is under pressure. So would you believe that the area to the northeast, like Greenland, is pushing to the southwest? The area around California is pushing to the northeast. So it puts the Great Lakes region under pressure. And what happens under pressure is that the earth pushes up.
These ridges have a simple name: pop-ups.
The pop-ups are a demonstration of the fact that earthquakes are occurring in the region and will continue to occur.
We don't normally associate the Great Lakes region with earthquakes, but the lakebed is showing signs that seismic activity may be more frequent than we think.
It was only since the advent of multi-beam we could actually clearly understand this network of cracks and fractures that had been thrown up into bedrock ridges.
These long ridge-like features are tectonic pop-ups. And what they are is compressional fractures in the rock. Like this piece of paper, the limestone here has compressed, and you started pushing on it from either direction, it would fold up in the middle. So this is how a pop-up is formed. What they tell us is that the lake isn't as geologically stable as we were led to believe.
Taking this detailed multi-beam data, we will drain Lake Ontario near Toronto Harbour and see for ourselves what is on the lake bed. The number of interconnected pop-ups is staggering. They are 1 to 3 meters high, between 5 to 10 meters wide, and can run for many kilometers along the lakebed. No one knows for sure how old they are. But with this evidence of seismic activity, what does the future hold for this part of the Great Lakes?
The history in southern Ontario is very low amplitude earthquakes. We have lots of very, very small ones. Will there be big events in the future? that need to be taken into account? We don't think so, but that research is needed to make sure we build structures strong enough to withstand the anticipated largest earthquake or the largest force that will be placed on these structures.
Draining Lake Ontario doesn't only reveal a possible future, it also gives a glimpse of a turbulent past. At the eastern end of the lake, near its exit into the St. Lawrence River, a mysterious and strange feature lies just below the surface. This is Charity Shoal, nearly 20 kilometers offshore, right on the US-Canadian border. It is a shallow ridge with a lighthouse to help steer ships away from its dangerous shoals. Recent depth surveys reveal a circular anomaly, but its origins are a mystery. Today, Charity Shoal will be multi-beamed in detail for the very first time. As the boat moves back and forth over the shoal, the feature begins to take form. A crater-like image is revealed. But what is a crater doing in the Great Lakes? Troy Holcomb from Texas University A&M has been interested in this feature for years. Now he wants to solve the mystery of Charity Shoal.
From what we've seen, Charity Shoal is a very old feature that has been re-excavated by glacial erosion. It still looks very possible that this is an impact crater, an extraterrestrial impact, but it's remaining to be confirmed.
Yeah, that does look absolutely amazing. You really get a feel for its size.
Barringer Crater seems to be frozen in time, looking like it did 50,000 years ago when a meteor traveling at over 40,000 kilometers per hour slammed into the Earth. Did Charity Shoal ever look like this?
I think is important for comparing with the Charity Shoal crater because both craters were formed in stratified sedimentary rocks, and both craters are about the same size. On Charity Shoal, we're seeing ridges that look like the exposed edges of bedrock at the top of the rim, just like you have here, only eroded in the case of Charity Shoal. Both craters are nearly round and have a continuous rim. They're both about 1.2 kilometers in rim-to-rim diameter. And this is an important feature because it means that both craters, if Charity Shoal is indeed an impact crater, it means that both craters would have experienced about the same projectile coming in and the same size of explosion.
Like Barringer Crater, a meteorite 50 meters in diameter could have plunged into the primeval Ontario countryside. A 10 to 20 megaton explosion could have created Charity Shoal. When we drain Charity Shoal, we see the similarities. But it has gone through at least 4 glaciations and has been underwater for thousands of years. It's a shadow of its former self. But just maybe, millions of years ago, if you stood on the rim of Charity Shoal, it would have looked like this. A meteorite strike is not the only dramatic event to impact the lake's region. Violent storms lash these inland seas, sending ships into the depths. We reveal some of the most dramatic evidence of nature's ferocity as we continue to drain the Great Lakes. When we drain the Great Lakes, part of our own history will be revealed scattered across the lake beds. Shipwrecks, nearly 6,000 spread out over 5 Great Lakes. Metal and wooden relics hidden under the surface of the water that we can now see in all their glory. Some are still majestic and upright, others torn, twisted, and broken up. The shipwrecks are some of the most impressive sights to behold, when we drain the Great Lakes.
The large number of shipwrecks in the Great Lakes really speaks to the volume of shipping that was happening. So for a couple hundred years, when there's this really intense shipping going on in the Great Lakes in the late 18th and 19th and early 20th century, when this was the busiest waterway on Earth.
Russ Green works at NOAA's Thunder Bay National Marine Sanctuary on the shores of Lake Huron. Here, like many areas on the Great Lakes, numerous shipwrecks scatter the lake bed.
Lakes is a misnomer. I mean, this is the largest freshwater system on Earth. They are massive. They're treacherous, tough places to be if you're in a 130-foot schooner in the 1870s in November. The driving rain, freezing, caking onto your rigging. They're dangerous places to ship. Fire, storm, fog, shoal, human error, no radar, no GPS, lots of collisions just off here in Thunder Bay. All of these things contribute. It's the volume and the hazards contribute to why we have so many shipwrecks.
The northeast sector of Lake Michigan, the Manitou Passage, is a stunning area above the water as the sand cliffs of Sleeping Bear Dunes National Lakeshore tower over the passage that was once a major shipping route. But under the water, things are changing rapidly with the onslaught of the mussels. Divers prepare to dive a wreck off the shores of South Manitou Island. The wreck is called Three Brothers, famous for being buried for most of the last century under sand, until a decade ago, when shifting sands revealed it again to the world. Unfortunately, the ship is now a shocking example of the true effect of the mussels. A form of algae, known as Cladophora, is growing at a phenomenal rate. As the mussels clarify the water, sunlight penetrates deeper into the lake, resulting in explosive algal growth. This Cladophora is dying and collecting in a thick, decaying mass near the wreck. The dead algae releases toxins fatal to fish and birds. Here in the Manitou Passage, an environmental meltdown is underway.
It looks like there's a thick layer of mussel shells all around the outside of the hull. And here is the dead and decaying Cladophora. And boy, there's a lot of that down there.
I really think that's a profoundly dead Cladophora on the bottom. The volumes that are there are quite large, and seeing how it's worked its way around the wreck. It took some wave energy to get it there, but the fact that there's freshly killed fish means it has to be active in its decay and its production of the botulism toxin. The first thing I wonder is, where else is this occurring? To my knowledge, I don't know of other places in the lakes, but I can only guess that if it's occurring here, it's got to be occurring in many other places.
A mapping venture initiated by the National Park Service at Sleeping Bear Dunes and the Great Lakes Water Studies Program at Northwestern Michigan College is using multibeaming to help further understand more about this ecological problem affecting this part of Lake Michigan.
We're really hoping to find these areas of dramatic cliffs and places where the bathymetry changes very quickly, and hopefully find some of these nearshore depression areas where we suspect algae might be accumulating.
We're moving the system over what we call the Cladophora graveyard, and this is
The Cladophora Graveyard, the name given to the area around the Three Brothers. They are hoping that the multibeam can give clues to why this is happening.
and then there it is showing up in the waterfall image.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Let us slow it back and go.
Yeah, I think that'll work. That should be fine. Whatever you need to hold.
I'm able to.
After a few passes, the multibeam clearly shows the deep depression creating this ecological problem. The shipwreck sits right in the middle of this sand depression, and because of this geological feature, the algae is captured and decays in this area. As we drain the Manitou Passage, How many more areas are like this on Lake Michigan? And the rest of the Great Lakes? And is this the first stage of the end of the Great Lakes as we know them?
I don't think I would ever doom our lakes. We've been here for several thousand years, and there's many thousand years to come. Our ecosystem is undergoing a severe challenge. The changes that have occurred in the last 20, 30 years are dramatic. The lakes are strong enough. It's just, what is the new ecosystem, and how will that new ecosystem evolve, and how will we interact with it?
There are many legendary Great Lakes stories, but none so captivating as the most iconic of them all, the sinking of the Edmund Fitzgerald. As we drain the Great Lakes, we have uncovered dramatic evidence of a rich and varied past, both natural and man-made. And geological wonders hidden from view. These inland seas were the highway into the continent, the trail of wreckage proving the lakes were always in control. Nowhere more so than the largest of them all, Lake Superior. With the deepest water and the mightiest storms, it is a test for the most modern of ships. On the south shore, Whitefish Point is known as the graveyard of shipwrecks. One particular wreck, 27 kilometers offshore, has taken on legendary status.
No doubt the iconic shipwreck of all the 6,000 that have gone down in the Great Lakes is the 1975 loss of the Edmund Fitzgerald.
The Edmund Fitzgerald, the largest ship to have sunk on the Great Lakes. When we drain the water out of Lake Superior, we can see this mighty ship as never before.
It was probably the worst storm in 3 decades that claimed the Edmund Fitzgerald. It sunk in 535 feet of water without a single cry for help, and it took 29 men to the bottom with it, still remaining with the ship to this day.
Tom Farnquist knows the wreck of the Fitzgerald all too well. He has led 3 expeditions to the watery grave and is one of the few people who have seen it firsthand.
Our exploration of the Edmund Fitzgerald revealed a ship badly damaged. It was ripped in half. The forward section, which is about 200 plus feet long, is sitting almost on an even keel. The stern twisted off and fell upside down.
Based on side-scan sonar data, these images show how the Edmund Fitzgerald sits on the lake bed 163 meters down. The images speak to the intensity of the storm and how quickly she sank.
If you were to drain Lake Superior, you would see the damage to the bottom caused by the impact of the ship. The rest of the lake bottom looks like a moonscape. Quite smooth, little potholes here and there, but you get near the Edmund Fitzgerald, it almost looked like a snowplow had gone along and pushed the clay up on either side of the Fitzgerald. It literally plowed its way into the bottom. Maritime experts, naval architects, suggest that the Fitzgerald hit the bottom at about 35 miles an hour. 27 feet down below the clay, it hit bedrock and started coming apart. This mountain of steel is in pretty good condition in some respects. The paint is there, it's very visible, you can read the name on it. So this moment in time is still well preserved by the cold, deep waters of Lake Superior. I've been on a lot of shipwrecks over a couple of decades, but nothing as grabbing or as moving as the Edmund Fitzgerald, knowing that 29 sailors in modern day went down in this shipwreck. It is still the most mysterious of all the shipwrecks on the Great Lakes.
Undisturbed and silent, the Edmund Fitzgerald will haunt Superior's lakebed for decades to come. A reminder of the power and majesty of the largest freshwater system on Earth. A system whose secret underwater world is revealed for the first time when we drain the Great Lakes.